joining us here at 6 o'clock. We begin tonight with a follow-up. Tonight we know more about why charges of negligent homicide and injury to a child against an Athens bus driver have been dropped. John Stevens was driving the school bus involved with a crash with a train in Athens in 2019. One student died and another was injured. KLTV7's Jamie Boyum reports tonight on the new evidence that led to this case being dismissed.
Justin Weiner is John Stevens' attorney. He says new evidence was presented to a Henderson County grand jury on November 16th.
In this situation, the Henderson County District Attorney's Office was not prosecuting this case. The Attorney General's Office was. And so you can imagine over the course of years of litigating this, especially when it involves Union Pacific, we came across some additional information and evidence that we felt like was very pertinent to the case.
The Assistant Attorney General was notified and they informed the grand jury. As for what the new evidence was,
there was a digital recording device on the train that showed that the train was speeding as it entered the city in violation of the municipal ordinance. Not necessarily at the time of impact, but obviously speed's very important to a train. It impacts their ability to brake, their horning patterns, that sort of thing.
And he adds there has been another wreck at the same place since the bus wreck in 2019.
Federal filings as of last September filed by Union Pacific still don't list this crossing as a bus crossing, which is a big deal.
He says information about a crossing is computed into a hazard index and based on that score tells what kind of precautions need to be taken.
We believe that if it was reported appropriately and correctly that that was a bus crossing and the number of accidents that have been there, that maybe they put arms up out there or something to make it a little safer.
Weiner says he hopes with criminal charges dropped, it will bring closure to those affected by the tragedy. Jamie Boyum, KLTV 7 News.
And Weiner also tells us the Federal Railroad Administration has an accident prediction model for railroad crossings and says there are 53 crossings in Henderson County and this one is ranked the most dangerous. Yet there are other crossings that have armed guards on them, but the one in question does not.